to y'all. My wife told me it's time to get something ready for Rise and Shine so that she can take care of it tonight instead of in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning. I guess I better do what I'm told to do. I like to smile. I like to laugh. I like to feel good in my heart. I like the moments of life when something that happens brings back memories to my youth. The video that you saw just thrilled my heart tonight. Two young people from our church. His name is Bear, and he's a great young man. Her name is Timber. She's a crackerjack. She really is. She wants to drive everything. She's got a steering wheel on it. Well, I got a couple old beaters here, a 64 and a 54 Ford 150s. And over the years, I've created a road around the 5-acre property that we have here. And I was able to make both of those young people smile tonight by putting them in the driver's seat, ride around with them a couple times, and then turn them loose. What could they hurt? You see, that's a throwback to the old rust bucket days of my youth when Nelson Peters always had the fastest car in the neighborhood, the biggest engine, the most horsepower, and he was our pastor. And I thought he was one cool dude. See, while most pastors had a very modest looking cars, that's what Nelson took fishing with him. I'm very modest. He didn't want the fish to think that he had anything of this world's goods. But buddy, when he came to pick me up to take me with him on Sunday afternoon to play the guitar, some of the cars that he had. And then he had a son-in-law by the name of Raymond Martin. Raymond Martin. I remember 5 years running in a row going back to Arden to preach a revival where Raymond Martin was a pastor of two different churches back there in the North Country. And just like his daddy-in-law, Raymond had a muscle car with a big engine in it. It was these kind of things that kind of influenced me because some of the values that I learned, most of the values, even my style of pastoring was somehow learnt in the corridors of that little standard church in Ivanhoe, north of the railroad station, where Nelson Peter, with tears in his eye, would cry out the gospel message in a humble farmer's way. He never had a doctorate, probably never had much of a degree, but in my books, he stood as a man among men. Because he not only loved the Lord and was passionate about it, he had a hot car. More than one of them. And when I'd get in to go for a drive with him, whew, baby, it was a drive. It was like going to the drag strip. I'm not saying that we drove in excessive speeds. I'm just saying that there was a mile between where we were and where we're going to get there. The starting of it probably ended up being faster than anybody else in town was going to do it at. We got there. And so tonight, as I watch those two teenagers that are going through something in their life, and I was able to put them behind the wheel and watch them do something that brought a smile to their face, I felt like Nelson Peters was looking down and say, "Attaboy. Attaboy, Ken, that's the way I raised you. That's what I taught you. Take what God's blessed you with and use it to mentor somebody else." I stood on the pulpit Sunday morning beside a young man, just a teenager, and God has called him to preach. I thought his brother was the one that was called to preach, but I've learned not to argue with God. God knows. His brother's called to be a fireman. We need firemen. But Dom was called to preach. And you know, when Dakota and Dom came over here, now I'm not talking about the kids tonight. These are the boys that come over every day. They didn't know how to drive. They didn't know how to put a tool in their hand. They didn't know much about the practical things of life. But today I needed a little mechanical work done. They know where all the tools are. I said, "Hey, which one of you guys is the most mechanical?" And I watched them as they climbed under that old red truck. And they found the wrench that would fit. And they began to do what I asked them to do. And they can get into any of these vehicles and drive them around that old road that I made around the property, but got some gravel on it. We use it for the live nativity, but I use it to let kids drive on. But many kids learned to drive on that road around our 5 acres of property. So tonight, as I sat back in the old rocking chair and I watched Timber and Bear drive them old beater trucks, I couldn't be a happier pappy or a happier pastor, because I know they will never forget it. There'll be a day when they'll tell their kids, "Boy, you won't believe what happened on that night." They look at that picture. Our pastor let us take his old trucks, and we each had one, and we drove around. He actually got out and let us drive. How else do you learn to drive? Now, I tell you, folks, when I step on the pulpit to preach next Sunday morning, those kids are going to be wide awake and listening to what I got to say. The same as what I was when Nelson Peters would stand up there. Because I thought when he got out of the pulpit, he was a man. Same way that I felt about Barney Woods when I was about ready to get beat up one night and he came around the corner of the tabernacle at the Ivanhoe camp meeting and was pulling off his coat as he came around the corner and said, "You guys, there was 2 guys going to beat me up. Said they already had me. One was holding me, and I was just ready to get a thumping when he showed up. And he says, "Hey, you guys want to fight? Fight me." You can believe me when I tell you that I carried that man's picture in my Bible. It's still there. His son Pat and I are good friends. Son Jim, haven't seen in years, but his grandson Stacy. These were the men in my life that weren't sissies. They weren't soft. They were able to rise to the occasion and deal with the stuff that real men need to deal with sometime. Defend yourself, drive yourself, not afraid to have a fast vehicle, a muscle car. Didn't really care what anybody in the congregation said. It's what he wanted. He had it. He considered it a blessing from God. But for this old boy, when the service was over and he opened the door and said, "Come on, get in, Ken," he had my attention. Barney Woods came around the corner, whipping off his coat and saying, "Hey, you want to fight? Fight me." There was a man that was willing to fight if there was a cause to fight. Oh, he spent time on his knees. There's a time to pray and there's a time to fight. They left an incredible mark on my life. So tonight I sat down on the rocking chair in front of my house, and I watched them two old beater trucks keep going around the circle. They must have went around a dozen times, maybe 24 times, around and around. They'd go by and they'd go, teenagers. Wow. My heart's blessed. If I can do anything to point them to this man right here, the Lord Jesus Christ, I'll consider my living to not be in vain. I asked them to give me permission to use their names in these pictures. They said that's great. I suspect they want their friends to see them driving them old beaters. I guess what I want to do is ask you, are you mentoring anybody? Paul had a Timothy. Can you imagine what our communities would be like if there was somebody in your life you were mentoring? Our pastor, Pastor Ron Parr, developed and started a great program at the fire company for young kids to be involved. He's still doing that in the church today. Make sure them teenagers and those kids have programs. How I love that. Well, I'm going to sign off here. I've talked for nearly 10 minutes. Hope you have a good day. I hope God brings somebody into your life that you can mentor. They can walk with you and talk with you. You can let them drive your tractor or truck or go to the job site with you, because someday they'll need you. You can take them for supper. Oh, yeah, it'll cost you money. Yeah. It's cost my wife and I lots of money to mentor young people. But now, when we see them coming to church, they're bringing their kids along with them. price tag was not too high. See, what are you trying to tell us today? Find somebody to have an influence on, and the best way to do it is with friendship evangelism. Be a mentor. Share your life, your hobbies, your interests. There's lots of kids who need that. Have a good one. God bless. Bye.